everyone, and welcome to another video of Linux for absolutely beginners. My name is Tia from DevOps Easy Learning, and today we'll be going through how to connect to a Linux server using SSH, and SSH just stands for Secure Shell, right? It is just a protocol that we use to connect to a Linux server securely, which means when we connect to a Linux server using SSH, the communication that will be going on back and forth between the client machine and the server will be secure, right? And also we have another video in our playlist that can explain some different tools that we can use to connect to a Linux server, especially on Windows. If you want to connect to a Linux server using Windows PC, you can either use the built-in command line interface, which is the command prompt or PowerShell, or you can also install a third-party tool like Gigbash, Putty, or Mobile Extend. If you're using Mac have a built-in terminal already that you can use to connect to a Linux server, and you don't really need to install a third-party tool. Now, how can we basically connect to a Linux server using SSH? Here, you have your client machine, you have a server. How are you going to connect? Basically, SSH basically run on something called port 22, right? Let me explain what I mean by port. If you go ahead here and kind of look for my Epic pen, that's something that I use online. And let's say you have a house, basically. How do you get in your house? You need to open the door before you get in your house. If you close all the doors, nobody can get in your house, right? And if you give access, that means you give a code to your house to somebody, yeah, the person can basically go to your house, punch that key, and get in. That means you give the proper access to that person to basically open your door and get into your house. And if the person is trying to get into your house without proper access, that is what we call in IT hacker, right? Because they are just trying to hack you, right? He's trying to get into your server without your consent. They are trying to figure out what can be your server username or your server password and trying to see if they can get in. Now, the same way that if you want to get into your house, either you can use a door, but you can just use the door to get in. The same thing applies with servers. You have your server here, and you have a client machine here, somebody that want to connect. If I'm trying to connect to this server using SSH, if I don't have access, that means if the port, we call this one a door, this is the same thing like your door. Yeah, like your door. If there's nobody here to open this door so that I can actually get access to this virtual machine, I will not be able. And what is that door using SSH protocol? It is called a port, right? It is called a port, and that port is port 22 by default. By default, SSH run on port 22. And everybody basically know already that SSH protocol run on port 22, right? And some company, for security reason, might change this port and put something else. And we are going to see if, let's say you are working somewhere, if they want to enhance security, as you guys can see here, if they want to enhance security, they can go ahead and change this port, because the whole world basically know that SSH protocol run on port 22. And let's say we kind of change the SSH port. How are we going to connect to a server when that port is changed? And also, how are we going to connect to a server when we're still using a default port? That is the goal. Now, I basically have a server up and running already in the cloud, and I have a proper access, right? I mean, before you go through this exercise, you must have a server that is already running. And on that server, you must have a user account, right? That means username and password, and also either the IP address, the public IP address of that server, or the DNS of that server. And we are going to use the public IP and also the DNS. And the server that I have now that is running, it is basically running in Azure, right? Now, let me go ahead and see. Here, this is the command that we can use to connect. We can basically use SSH, the protocol is SSH, the username, and the IP address of the server that you want to connect. Or SSH, the username, and the DNS, which is the full qualified domain name of the server. Because sometimes, some company, if you want to be like really technical, if you want to do stuff the proper way, right? You don't want to log in, you don't want to give the IP address to somebody to go ahead and log in on the server. That is not good, because a human being is not really good to remember digit, which mean numbers. If you give me something like a name, like maybe this one, if you give me like a server 3.anomicatech.com, I might remember this one instead of you giving me maybe 1.47.1.68, stuff like this to remember, right? This one is really hard to remember. But if, for instance, somebody just give you a fully qualified domain name, it's easy to remember. And that is why a lot of companies out there, they won't use IP to connect. Instead, they are going to use a domain name, right? And I have a server here that I basically set it up with a fully qualified domain name. And that is what we use at DevOps Easy Learning also to connect to our servers. We don't use IP address, but instead we are going to use fully qualified domain name. All our servers, we make sure that we resolve the IP address into a specific domain name so that we can use that to connect. And the one that we use, the domain name is called anomicatech.com, right? Now, let's say we basically change a default port of SSH. How can we connect? That is where we use it. SSH, we say -p, means we want to specify a port. And let's say you are working somewhere and they say, okay, go ahead and use the port 800 to connect. That means they change the default port, which is 22, and put port 800. And that's why you say -p, and you put your port 800 here and put either the IP address or the fully qualified domain name. And another way to connect here, it is by using something called a key, a private key, especially if you launch a server in the cloud, especially in Azure or AWS, you can decide to basically use the private key to connect, or you can use the username and password, but it is always like company would like you to use a private key, right? Because this is very, very secure. And if you want to know how to connect to a server using this private key, either in AWS or in Azure, please let me know in the comment below, and I will go ahead and kind of design a video that will show you guys how to create a VM either in AWS or in Azure, and basically create a key that you will use that key to connect. But today we'll be just going through either we use the DNS or the IP address to connect. Now, let me go ahead now and kind of jump into my terminal, and we'll go ahead and connect. Here, you need to have access in Windows. It can be any command line interface. Here, this is my command line interface, and I'm going to use couple. I will use the CMD command, and also I will use a PowerShell command to show you guys that you can use any of those to connect. Let me go ahead here and pull maybe my Gig Bash terminal first. Within my Gig Bash terminal, I am just going to type SSH, and I'm going to put my username, which I it already exists on that server, and I'm going to put act. First of all, use the IP address, and let me just have the IP address here on my second computer, which is this, right? I will just paste it. As you guys can see here, this is really hard to remember, because if you send this to you, and every time that you want to connect, you need to copy this, because it looks like a phone number, right? I myself, I remember only my phone number, but not somebody else, because it's a little bit tough to remember all this digit number. And that is why you need to make sure that you can make others' life easy and kind of convert this thing into a DNS. And if you go ahead and hit enter here, as you guys can see, this is the first time that I'm trying to connect. Linux will ask, what do you want to do? Do you really want to do this? Notice here, it is yes or no, not why, because a lot of folks just go and type why. Yes, and I'll hit enter. It will ask for my password, and I'm going to punch my password. As you guys can see here, we are about to connect, right? This is one of our servers that we basically use at DevOps Easy Learning. As you guys can see, this is server 4. I am already connected, and let me kind of exit again, and I will record the command, and I'm going to push -P here to see. You guys will see -P, because when you want to connect, and if you don't specify -P, it is going to use port 22, which is the default SSH port, right? Now, let us go ahead and kind of put -P and say, hey, that port is 22. In case they change it and put something, that is how you connect, right? And I'll go ahead and punch my password again. As you guys can see, that I am able to connect. And here we are kind of using gig bash in Linux, right? I'll go ahead and kind of exit. Now, let's say I want to use another stuff like the CMD. I can go to my search bar and type command prompt, right? I can just go here. Let me go to my search bar here, and I'm going to type command prompt. You go to your search bar and you type the CMD command and click open that CMD. And here I can just go ahead and grab the command that I used here to connect. If I select this and go ahead, copy, I can right click here to paste. I can right click here to paste, as you guys can see, hit enter, and I will be able to connect. Like I said, this is a built-in terminal for Windows operating system, and you don't need a third-party tool to basically connect, right? As you guys can see, I am in that server already. If you exit, I can use another one that is a PowerShell terminal. Let me go ahead here and open PowerShell. Just open your search bar and you type PowerShell, and you can open PowerShell. And here, paste, right click to paste the same thing, and I can hit enter here, and I will go ahead and punch my password. And here we are using what? We are just using the IP address to connect, right? I basically have two servers. One is just we can use the IP address, and another one we are going to use the fully qualified domain name. Now, I'm going to change this. Instead of IP address, I'm going to call this server 4. Server 4. Server. Oops. Server 4.anomikatech.com and 4.anomikatech. You need to make sure that there is no typo. .com, because if there's a typo here, it is not going to work. And I have a typo already. Anomikatech. And let me double check server4.anomikatech.com. And if you hit enter, as you guys can see, it kind of gives me some nasty message here, right? And this is something that usually like bother a lot of folks, even in the real world. I remember I myself, the first time that I kind of have this error message, I struggled a little bit. It took me almost half of my day to trying to figure out how can I resolve this issue. Please, if you ever, this happened just because I used this domain name before to do something, and here the server was recreated and the IP address changed, and basically what we have in the host file change, right? And we need to kind of remove this. And that is why on this PowerPoint here, I have SSH keygen-r, SSH keygen-r, and you can go ahead and kind of punch that server name and remove that. If you copy this and go here, first of all, this is the terminal. Open my terminal, type SSH keygen-r. And where am I going to connect? I am trying to connect to server 4. As you can see here, it's going to tell you that the host key for server 4 has changed, right? Because when you log in into a remote server, what happens here is that it is going to store the server IP or the server URL into the host file, right, on your local system. And that host file is in your home directory with something called .ssh, and you have that known host. And let's say tomorrow the IP address you are trying to connect to the same server, the IP address have changed, you are going to have this nasty message here. And if you don't know this command called SSH keygen-R and the server DNS that you want to connect, or the server, and you put this, you just put whatever is complaining here. It is complaining about this server, and that's why I put server 4. If it was complaining about the specific IP address, you can go ahead and put that IP address that you are seeing here right here, and you just go ahead and fire enter. As you guys can see here, it will go ahead and remove this in well-known host. When it remove this now in this well-known host on your Windows or your Mac operating system, you can now connect and you will not have any issue. If you hit enter now, I'm glad that I find this issue here, because a lot of our students sometimes face this issue and they don't know what to do. As you guys can see, when you are trying to connect, you are using this, right? It basically convert this domain name into an IP address right here, which is the public IP of this server, right? And it's going to store that in a well-known host, right? And let's say tomorrow this DNS change, what happened is that the IP address will not be the same. Let's say you just shut down this server and you launch a new one, or the IP address that this domain name is pointing to basically change. You have this nasty message and you need to remove this IP address, which is just pointing to this in well-known host, just by typing the command SSH keygen, and that will basically get everything out and replace with a new IP address. If you go ahead here and kind of say yes, it will ask my password, and I will go ahead and type this and connect. And when this will connect, you guys will see I will try it again the second time and I will not have that issue no more. If you exit and go ahead and use the SSH keygen, let's say I want to use the default port that is 22 and hit enter. As you guys can see, password, and boom, it will never ask me anything already because I've removed that already in well-known host. If you have a Mac operating system, very simple, just pull your terminal and you can go ahead and connect. But before you do so though, you need to have a server either in the cloud or any box, anything that you want. And when you have that server have access to internet that you can use an SSH protocol to connect. And like I said, if you want to know how to launch a server in the cloud and connect properly, please let me know in the comment below. This is just Linux videos, but not maybe AWS or Azure video, right? So that I can go ahead and create a little server and show you guys how to connect. That's it with this video, guys. If you like this video, please let me know in the comment below. And also, please, if you have not yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, please go ahead and do so that you will be notified when we publish a new video. And also, please do not forget to follow us on social media such as Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and so on. Bye-bye. Thank you.